Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to ITM's dashboard seminar for the private sector. We're just going to leave it a couple of minutes to let other attendees who are less on time than you arrive, but we'll get started in a couple of minutes' time. Thank you. Just for those people who've arrived in the last minute or so, we're just allowing another minute or so for others to arrive before we get started. Thank you. Right, once again, good morning, everybody. Welcome to ITM's Dashboards webinar for the private sector. My name is Mark Adamson. I'm Sales Director at ITM, and I have the privilege of hosting today. We had an excellent session, a parallel session yesterday afternoon for the public sector, which we feel went very well. Hopefully the audience felt the same as well. We've set out really to kind of achieve the three principles that I'm sure you know Lord Reith, when he was first Director General of the BBC, said that he wanted to achieve back in 1927. And that was to inform, educate, and entertain. We'll do our best to achieve all those three principles, and by all means mark us against them if you'd like to. But in doing so, remember the wisdom of Meatloaf: 2 out of 3 ain't bad. So just tolerate us if we don't quite manage all three. Rory, if you can take us to the agenda, please. So we have two excellent speakers today joining two of my ITM colleagues. First of all, Joe Stacey, who's Senior Industry Engagement Manager at PDP. He'll be giving us an industry update. Then Andrew Lowe from ITM, he's an actuary with ITM. We'll be talking about what the term connection ready means. It's a term you've probably heard, and Andrew's going to work through what he sees as connection ready meaning. And then Kelsey Mariner, our second external guest, who's been integral at XPS to implementing their dashboard solutions. Kelsey will talk about how XPS is getting its clients ready for dashboards. And then finally, Maurice Titley, who's Chief Innovation Officer here at ITM. He'll talk about what constitutes a good integrated service provider, or ISP. So that's our agenda. We will be going through a number of slides today. We will share those slides by email afterwards. And we are very happy to take questions. Please raise these at any time. You can do so by using the questions facility, which should be appearing on the top right-hand side of your screen. It's in a box there in a panel. Please do enter any questions you have and submit them. Only we at the conference end will be able to see those, so please crack on and do that. We will take as many of these as we can, but we'll do that after the presentation. So we've allowed some time later on for that those questions to be answered. And I should have said earlier on actually that we are recording this session. so that others who couldn't make it today are able to access it. That shouldn't affect anybody other than the panel. It's only the panel who are exposed on this, but just for completeness, I thought I'd mention that. So I'm going to hand across to Joe for an industry update. Then we'll have Andrew on connection ready, Kelsey on how XPS is readying its clients, and Morris on what does a good ISP look like. So I will now hand across to Joe, and hope you enjoy the webinar, everybody. Cheers.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for having me on your webinar. So today I just wanted to give you an update on the dashboards landscape, touching on upcoming program milestones and how PDP is working to support and collaborate with industry. We've made significant progress revising the delivery plan to fit with the new connection deadline of the end of October 2026. And I'll go into some detail around our work on connection standards and user testing, giving you an overview of where we are with the programme and what's planned for this year. Industry, the government and regulators have shown a real collaborative spirit, and I and the whole team at PDP remain grateful for all the hard work and commitment that's gone into making dashboards a reality. So I'd just like to begin providing you with an update around the connection deadline and the guidance. So all pension providers and schemes in scope, as I'm sure you're aware, will be required by legislation to connect to the dashboard's ecosystem. So preparation is important. DWP has published amended regulations with the connection deadline of the 31st of October 2026. So this is the date by which all relevant schemes will need to connect to the ecosystem. The previous connection staging timeline will be replaced by guidance, which will set out when different cohorts of schemes based on type and size will be expected to connect. And pension providers and schemes will need to have regard to this guidance. The FCA have also updated their rules in line with DWP's revised approach. So the connection deadline provides certainty for industry and also ensures connection remains mandatory. The staging timetable that will be published in guidance, meanwhile, provides that phased approach to connection that is so important to manage the volume and flow of connections to help ensure all providers and schemes can connect to the ecosystem on time and to support the industry to manage onboarding in a stable and staggered way. So connecting in line with the staging timetable will also support more extensive user testing sooner, which will in turn make it possible to launch the service to the public earlier. We anticipate publication of the timetable and guidance by DWP, as they've said, in spring of this year, so it is really not far away. The aim is to publish the guidance with at least 12 months notice ahead of the first connect by date in guidance. DWP had previously shared drafts of the timetable, and we encourage you to contact your administrator or ISP for an informal steer on your indicative connection date. And I think there's going to be a bit of a conversation about that later on, and that will help with your internal planning. In advance of wider industry staging, we are working with volunteer participants, those building a direct route to connection, on plans to start connection testing with them later this year. We set out our roadmap to connection for participants, including plans for when we intend to share the updated information they need that will support connection, including updated standards. And this was shared at the end of last month. So in terms of standards, the Pension Schemes Act 2021 and the Pensions Dashboards Regulations give authority to the programme as part of the Money and Pension Service to set standards, and these relate to the practical operations of dashboard services and the digital infrastructure needed to support them. So standards include the data standards, technical standards, reporting standards, and the code of connection. There are also the design standards that dashboard service firms will need to abide by, which sit alongside and complement the FCA's rules for dashboard services. In 2022 and 2023, PDP held consultations on draft versions of the dashboard standards. The feedback was invaluable to help us clarify and refine the standards. We continue to work on finalising updated versions of these standards that will support connection testing and wider industry staging. the next version of the data standards will be published soon, around the same time as publication of the staging timetable and guidance. We will look to publish updated versions of other standards, such as the Code of Connection, once they have been tested and validated with our industry participants who are building a direct routes connection. So on the next slide, PDP continues to work collaboratively with DWP regulators and industry across a range of areas to deliver dashboards. We lead a range of groups and forums to support industry and to gain their input on dashboards to shape connection processes and guidance. And these include Connection Forum, which is an open forum and invites volunteer participants and wider industry to cover issues relating to connection to the dashboard ecosystem. We have a dashboards forum for those interested in developing and hosting an FCA regulated dashboard. And we do also host discussion forums, which are meetings held with interested parties to explore particular topics related to dashboards that have generated questions and where clarification has been sought, such as on value data requirements and around AVCs, for example. We also support and collaborate with industry through various working groups, which currently include the Connection Delivery Group. So this looks at testing and refining processes with our volunteer participants. So this is that cohort of all those building a direct connection to the ecosystem, and ITM is of course one of those. We will set up a connection working group for potential dashboard providers at a later date once the FCA dashboard rules have been finalised. We also have a communications group. We meet monthly with representatives from across industry working in comms, engagement and PR. And this year we do plan to launch a user testing and planning group, which we will convene to help plan and coordinate user testing activity, which I'll cover in more detail on the next slide. Finally, we have our Pensions Dashboards Advisory Group, which we're currently in the process of expanding. So this group provides an opportunity for industry and other experts to offer insights and help shape the delivery of dashboards. So moving on to user testing. So a crucial part of ensuring a reliable user experience is thorough user testing. And here I'm just providing an update on how we plan to test the service with users. So once the first pension providers and schemes are connected to the live dashboard ecosystem, we plan to undertake this all-important testing with real individuals using the service to see real data about their pensions. So this is crucial to demonstrate that the end-to-end user experience of the service is positive, safe, and that the service meets users' needs. And this type of testing can be carried out at scale and provide insights on, for example, user behaviours and also the success of things like data matching. So this user testing will also help to inform the Secretary of State's decision-making around the date that the service will be launched to the public, which we call the Dashboards Available Point, or DAP. So PDP intends to launch a user testing and planning group to develop the plans for user testing of the live service in the period once industry staging has begun. So this will include defining testing requirements and the activities involved, how users will be invited to participate in testing the service in a controlled environment, the volumes of users, and how insights from this testing will be gathered and reported on. So we will be working with industry partners to develop these plans, and we will regularly share updates from the group and from the user testing once it begins. So just finally on the last slide, before I hand over to Andrew, I just wanted to end by highlighting how you can keep up to date with news from the programme, and do contact us if you have any queries. So you can get in touch with the programme directly by emailing, and there's the address there, which is the supportpdp@maps.org.uk. And you can also visit our website, where we publish a range of articles, videos and reports on a regular basis to provide updates and general information about the programme. And you can also follow us on social media and sign up to our newsletter to receive the latest updates via email. Right then, I think I'm now handing over to Andrew.
Thank you very much, Joe, and good morning, everyone. So for this next section, we're going to take a look at what it means to be connection ready. So firstly, we're going to have a look at the various deliverables and elements that need to be prepared to ensure that you're going to be connection ready for dashboards. We're then going to move on and have a look at the potential timeline for delivering those elements and what that might look like, both thinking about individual scheme level and then more holistically at what that means from an industry perspective. And then for my last part, the last part of my slot, we're going to look at who may be able to help support you in the various elements of delivery. So at ITM, we are PASA's dashboards expert partner, and we've been heavily involved in supporting, developing and delivering a lot of the guidance around dashboards that PASA have produced. And for the purposes of this section, we're going to look at the connection ready pillars that are in the connection ready guidance from PASA that was released at the end of 2023. So if we consider these 5 pillars as the key supporting elements of being connection ready for dashboards and look at them individually, the first of these is probably the least dashboard specific, but really is crucially important to enabling all of the others in the overall delivery, which is governance readiness. So that's really just ensuring that you've got the right framework, the right decision-making processes, an appropriate plan in place to deliver all of the remaining elements of connection readiness for dashboards, and make sure that all of the various stakeholders are involved at the key points. The second pillar is that of matching readiness, and that is really just making sure that you are able to deal with find requests at scale, with the expectation that there will be significant use of dashboards. So that's going to entail making sure that you understand the quality and presence of personal data, thinking within the context of that what the appropriate matching approach for your scheme or schemes would be, testing that matching approach to understand how effective it might be, because different approaches to matching, that is choosing different elements of member supply data to use to identify whether or not you've got a true match to a benefit that sits within your scheme. Testing the effectiveness of that matching is really, really important to understand what the outcomes are likely to be. Off the back of that, that might trigger the need or the desire to do some improvement of personal data to improve the matching outcomes that you might get. Because after all, if full matches don't occur, you may end up with what are called possible matches, or even no matches at all. And the likelihood where an individual is expecting a match with your scheme or is provided with information about a possible match is that there will probably be more work to be done from an administrator perspective in terms of dealing with any queries off the back of that than would be if a full match was actually made. So there's a little bit of prepare upfront and take away potential effort at the back end here. Pillar 3 is pension values readiness, and that is ready to provide the view data at scale to dashboards once a match has been made. So that includes things like service data, pension values data, etc. So this really means understanding what you need to provide and then thinking about what you have in terms of that administrative and signpost data, the pension values data in line with the data standards. And then understanding as well what that will look like, and how consistent it is with your wider communications, because if it is telling a different story to what you may be sending out in benefit statements or other communications materials, that in itself can potentially trigger questions and queries and confusion among savers. Once you understand what you've got, what you need, and what you need to have, then filling in any gaps and implementing any changes to the data that you've got and the processes to deliver that, to ensure that it can be provided to dashboards in appropriate timeline, is going to be really crucial. So all of those elements make up the pension values readiness pillar. The technology readiness pillar, whilst obviously crucially important, is potentially one of the more straightforward pillars. Really, what it is crucial here is identifying your approach to connecting to dashboards, selecting the ISP that you want to use, installing that connection approach, and configuring and testing that such that you're confident that it's going to work once dashboards are live. And then pillar 5 is the administration readiness pillar, which is potentially a little bit down the track from some of the other ones, but no less important, and certainly something that needs to be thought about whilst looking at the certainly pillars 2, 3, and 4. And really this is thinking about all of those queries that you might get around matching, around the data, thinking about the MI and reporting that you're going to need internally at a scheme level to make decisions about dashboards, and about much wider things off the back of the different outcomes and the different things that dashboards will trigger members and savers to do. So ultimately, this could impact a plethora of business processes, communications, reporting structures, etc., right across your operating model for schemes and organizations, and therefore needs to be thought about in great detail. And also, because we can only surmise and guess and use the results of the user testing that Joe's talked about to plan for this. Ultimately, once dashboards are live, there is a chance that the experience will be different than expectation, and changes will be need to be made further. So there needs to be some planning made for that as well. So next, we're going to look at the timeline for connection readiness, and just looking at at a pillar level, you can see that the balance of expectation from the various experts across the PASA Dashboards Working Group is that for a scheme starting from outset, this may take on average about 18 months to deliver. Obviously, setting up the governance at first, getting involved in understanding what's required from matching, values and view data, and then technology work streams will run for an extended period, and then the administration work stream is, as I said, a much later piece of the puzzle. However, we do know that all connection journeys are different, and that there are not that many schemes now who have done nothing on the preparation for dashboards. So everybody's at different points with different elements of the connection readiness. What we do know, though, is that nobody has completed connection readiness and actually connected to anything as yet. So there is still work to do for all parties. And I think it's really important to stress that early engagement with the suppliers that you've got to support this is really important, because there is going to be a demand across the industry based on the various connection guidance dates, and ultimately the deadline date of October 2026, which means that every scheme is going to require the different resources from different suppliers to support this. So it's not just thinking about your plan, but actually engaging with your suppliers to make sure they can support the plan that you've got to meet your connection guidance dates. So early engagement there really is crucial. I think that's the most important thing to take away from this. The last bit that we're going to talk about is who can help you deliver each pillar. So from a governance perspective, that generally the Dashboards Connection project is going to be led by the administration function that supports the scheme. And obviously trustees going to be crucial to being part of that, signing off on that plan. Obviously the trustees will then be decision makers throughout all of the other pillars, but they're not really going to be doing the do. However, we've got alongside the administrator in each of the other pillars are a number of other suppliers who can be incredibly helpful and essential in some cases in making sure that we can effectively deliver the connection ready elements. So if we think about the matching readiness pillar, you may wish to have data cleanse or data preparation experts, data analysis experts involved in ensuring that your matching data is as you would expect it to be and can deliver what you need it to. Your ISP provider will definitely be able to support with that as well. And Maurice is going to talk a bit later on about what makes a good ISP provider, so he'll go into this in more detail. Pension values readiness, there are a lot of different moving parts here. Certainly AVCs is a topic that continues to come up and provide challenges across the industry. Again, data experts in terms of understanding what you've got and how you can provide the right data. Your ISP provider, again, will be able to help, and certainly admin platform will potentially be a source of the calculations that are required to underpin pension values as well. From the technology readiness standpoint, again, that's going to be crucial for your ISP provider to be supporting, whether that's aligned to the same organization as your admin platform provision, or it's an independent ISP from that. And then on the administration readiness front, again, the ISP provider is going to be in a position to support in understanding the impact on a lot of the business processes that may need to change, as well as the MIN reporting that can come out the back of ISP provision. So now that I've covered that, I'm going to hand over to Kelsey, and I know she's going to talk about XPS's experience in this space to date. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Good morning, I'm Kelsey and I work with the Pensions Dashboards team at XPS Administration. XPS have based their pensions dashboard preparation work on the 5 PASS pillars mentioned previously. So it makes sense to start by looking at these pillars again and summarising how we are helping trustees ensure their schemes are dashboard ready in each of these areas. In terms of technology readiness, we have appointed ITM Equisoft's Pension Fusion as our integrated service provider, and we're testing the links between our administration systems and Pension Fusion. We've also been testing the configuration work required on an individual scheme level to ensure scheme connection processes will run smoothly well ahead of scheme connection dates. In terms of administration readiness, we've been looking at processes and systems to, among other things, calculate and upload annual values data, deal with possible matching queries and other member queries following the dashboard available point, and any additional reporting requirements that might apply following the connection and the dashboard available point. In terms of matching readiness, we've agreed a recommended matching policy set with regard to PASS guidance and the features of Pension Fusion, which is made up of a number of positive and possible match criteria. Based on research into member data, we believe this will result in a high percentage of members matching with their pensions across the majority of our schemes. There is a regulator requirement for trustees to set an appropriate policy based on their scheme data and have evidence to show they've done this. I'll cover later how we are helping trustees to consider and evidence that our recommended policy is appropriate for their scheme. In terms of pension values readiness, we are committed to ensuring, as far as possible, all relevant pension values will be available to pensions dashboards at all times across all schemes, not to rely on meeting statutory SLAs when a positive match is made. To do this, we intend on using a mixture of values already calculated on an annual basis, existing automation and tools, and where there are gaps, looking at tools designed specifically to calculate these required values in bulk. Again, I'll go into this a little bit more later on. In terms of governance readiness, we're looking at this in 2 parts. Firstly, on an individual trustee governance basis, we're working to give all trustees a clear picture of the work required to connect their individual schemes. On a wider scale, we're also looking at governance across our entire client base. Can you, Rory, next slide, please? Thank you. As you can see from the graph, XPS will need to connect between 250 and 300 schemes to pensions dashboards ahead of October 26. We have assessed all the schemes we administer, and based on the scheme size, scheme type, and the draft staging guidance shared by DWP in November 2023, we have estimated the staging timeframe for each scheme. As you can see, there's a lot of work to be carried out in a relatively short period of time, so it's imperative all clients are prepared to connect well ahead of their staging timeframe. Next slide, please. Back to governance on a scheme level, we've created a scheme dashboard journey, setting out the main stages and steps to ensure individual schemes are pensions dashboard ready. There are three main stages to this: review, prepare, and connect. If we work backwards from the connection date, given the volume of schemes connecting at the same time, we will allocate the last 3 months ahead of the connection date to carry out the final connection tasks, including final configuration, uploading and testing of data, as well as any regulatory connection tasks. We believe some schemes may need up to 12 months to prepare their scheme for pensions dashboard, including completing any data cleansing and calculation required, especially if this includes member tracing. In reality, this will differ per scheme, and to ensure trustees have a clear understanding of the work their scheme need to carry out, and to help us schedule this work, our main focus is currently on the review stage. XPS are preparing a dashboard connection readiness report for all administration clients. This report will include a review of the data schemes will need to provide to pensions dashboards so members can match with their pensions, including presence and validation checks and a comparison against financial reference data to identify any potential data cleansing requirements. We'll also include some matching analysis using tools replicated our recommended matching policy, scheme data, and the results of the Find Data review to estimate how many scheme members will or will not be able to match with their scheme pension via the dashboards. We'll also look at considering any other scheme-specific circumstances that could impact the work required to connect their scheme to the pension dashboards. For example, linked arrangements where we administer the DB benefits, but there is a separate DC section under another trust that's managed by another administrator. There could be further work involved in linking these two benefits. The report will also look at how the view data requirements will be met, and this analysis will include a check on membership and employer data held within our systems, as well as consideration of the work involved to meet the annual pension values data requirements. How this is met will largely depend on the type of benefits in the scheme and the current processes and systems in place. For example, where there's DC schemes, the existing calculations used to calculate SMPI data will likely be able to be utilised. For DB schemes, there's likely to be a bit more of a mixture. Some schemes may issue current statements to all or part of their membership, and there may be existing coding in place, which can either be used directly or enhanced to calculate values in bulk. Particularly where new tools may be required to calculate values data, there may be some additional tasks for trustees, including ensuring any benefit specifications are accurate and up to date, and that the deferred data needed to feed into any values data calculations is complete and accurate. Where trustees have reviewed this data in the past, we would suggest they look to ensure they've carried out any data actions, and if they haven't previously performed a review of this data, this now would be a good time to start carrying that out. The other main things to consider with values data is the value date. As we know, the value date of all value data provided for one scheme and different benefit types will need to be the same date. I understand that there have been some questions raised in industry about this, but we are working on the assumption that that will remain the case. So we do need to look at where existing values are calculated. Are these calculated consistently across the scheme at the same date? This is likely to be impacted where there is a linked arrangement, different administrators administering different benefits, or in the case of ABC benefits. There are a number of challenges with values data for ABC benefits. In many cases where ABC benefits are linked to a closed DB scheme, all correspondence with members is done via the scheme administrator, and ABC providers often hold limited personal member data. This could give them challenges when it comes to matching members with their pension benefits. The transfer of information between ABC providers and scheme administrators still relies heavily on paper and telephone communication and the manual matching of records. Active ABC arrangements may have moving memberships, which will need to be monitored. Ensuring annual values data is not only calculated at the same date, but also available at the same time every year for both ABC and scheme benefits will be a further challenge. There are two main ways to connect ABC benefits to pensions dashboards, either via the ABC provider or the administrator, and trustees will need to consider which approach they take. However, regardless of what approach is taken, to ensure members will see scheme benefits on the pensions dashboards together, there will need to be a reliable and efficient linking process so that electronic data can be passed between ABC providers and scheme administrators and linked to appropriate records. This may be for administrators to update ABC providers with personal details changes to ensure consistent matching and scheme links, or for ABC providers to send data to pensions dashboards for administrators to upload. To support this work, experts are currently working with some of our ABC providers and our integrated service provider to consider and test how reconciliation exercises can be carried out efficiently ahead of connection. Using all the analysis we carry out above, we will be creating a scheme-specific project plan for trustees, and in turn these feed into our overall project plan so that we are able to manage the connection of all schemes across a large client base. Thank you for listening. I'll now hand it to Maurice.
Thank you very much, Kelsey. Good morning, everybody. I'm Maurice Titley, Chief Innovation Officer at ITM, and I'm responsible for our dashboards proposition. And this morning I'm going to be talking about what makes a good ISP. I think firstly, I suppose the first thing to start is what is an ISP? ISP stands for Integrated Services Provider. So they provide the data for dashboards across a number of schemes and funds. Some parties are creating their own connection to dashboards, and if that's the case, then what we're talking about in this section of the webinar still applies to them, but for simplicity we'll just refer to ISP as we go through. So what does make a good ISP? Well, I think the first point is that ISPs are about much more than just a connection. So ISPs have got a lot to do. Now, the wheel that you see on the screen there summarizes the key components of what the ISP has to do. And some of those are defined by the Pensions Dashboards Programme. Obviously, the piece to the right, the connection to dashboards, is very tightly defined as to how that should work, and some of the reporting is defined. But a lot of it isn't defined, and innovation is required to decide how you're going to do it and the extent to which you're going to carry out these activities. And some of those areas of innovation are shown on the wheel. A key example, I think, is matching. The regulations set out what needs to be done when it comes to matching, but it doesn't set out how it's done. And PASA has produced 2 sets of guidance on matching, and that helps to explain how matching could be carried out and some of the approaches that could be used. But it's very much up to ISPs to decide how they're going to support that and how they're going to innovate technology to support it. So moving on to the first of these key areas, which is the connection to the central digital architecture that's being built by MAPS, and also the connection to pension dashboards themselves. So what makes a good ISP in this area? So firstly, I think it's working closely with PDP, building and testing the ISP side of that connection, and that build could start as far back as 2022 when the first specs were out there to actually show what's going to be required. Being ready to upgrade that connection as data standards change, because data standards are going to change again relatively soon when the new ones are produced, and they are expected to evolve over time. The key, though, I think, is how you test that connection with the PDP ecosystem. Pension Fusion was fortunate to be the first alpha tester to connect in 2022, and we're now part of the group of wider early volunteer participants who will be carrying on with their testing later this year. And the key from all that is, of course, to be ready to go into production in good time. And what does good time mean? I think if an ISP is supporting schemes with a connection date for the earliest of those schemes, then you need everything to be in place significantly before that connection date, so those schemes can run on in a stable way and know that they're ready to take that final step of connection when the time comes. Moving the focus to find and view. So find and view for an ISP in terms of what makes a good ISP is pretty much based around service levels. There's some pretty tight service levels that are defined in the Pensions Dashboards Programme Code of Connection. There are find and view response times, and the target to actually carry out a find process to respond back and say, yes, we have found a pension, or we might have found a pension, is a 15-second target with a 60-second SLA. When it comes to view responses, these are requests coming direct from the dashboard. This is the user using a dashboard, expecting to see their data to appear pretty much in real time. And for that reason, the response time target's 2 seconds with a 10-second SLA. These are tight targets, and undoubtedly a good ISP is going to be someone who can meet those targets very clearly and reliably. The next area is availability. So the Code of Connection standard also specifies levels of availability, 99.5% on a 24/7 basis, measured on a monthly basis is the current requirement that's set out there. And it's so important because if you have an ISP going offline with hundreds of schemes on its books, then anybody who does a find request at that point is not going to find any pensions that happen to be in those schemes. And that then attacks the whole sort of integrity of the dashboard if you're not actually seeing a whole bunch of your pensions that you do have. So it's so important that those service levels are actually met. Last but not least is the support an ISP offers to support the administrators and customers in their service levels that they have. The most important one of these, I think, is the 3 and 10 day response time that the administration teams have if they don't have a pension value already calculated, and to make sure that that is tracked, because that clock starts ticking when the request has come through, and that needs to be managed and recorded and reported back. So a good ISP will help the administration teams to actually manage that. Moving on to matching. So making matching work well is definitely something that an ISP needs to do, and it's very much up to them how they build this, as I was saying before. So first area I would say is to have flexible matching criteria. Scheme managers, trustees, FCA providers, they all will have their preferences in terms of how they would like to match, and they will all be aware of the fact that the data they hold, the depth and quality of the personal details they hold, will actually influence how effective that matching is going to be. So giving them that flexibility is really important. Having effective criteria for possible matching is also very important. Possible matching provides this safety net for members who don't match because of data problems, and you want that possible matching safety net to work well, to catch members where you want it to, but not to send too many false alarms, because if you're sending false alarms for possible matching, then savers who are using dashboards are being sent down paths that will lead them nowhere in terms of trying to find pensions, and of course administrators will have huge amounts of work trying to deal with them coming through saying, oh, I've been told I've got a pension with you, can I explore it? How you achieve that, PASA have got some good guidance in terms of what that looks like. The second piece of PASA data matching guidance goes into possible matching in more detail. But again, it's very much up to the ISP technology in terms of what they support. Lastly, with matching, it's making changes from experience. Well, it's really important to prepare your initial matching approach and be ready to go into bat. Of course, we will learn an awful lot from when dashboards do start being used. The one thing we really can't foresee is the extent to which individuals will actually volunteer extra data when they're searching for pensions. Are they going to put the NI number in? Are they going to put previous address in? And if they do, that affects how matching is going to work and how effective it's going to be. So being able to make those refinements quickly when that information comes through and having access to the management information to support that is going to be really important. Just briefly at the end here, I'd like to look at a couple of areas where ISPs can add value, where they can go a little bit beyond the core technology that they're providing. And these areas very much relate to the areas that Andrew and Kelsey have been describing in terms of the challenges facing providers and schemes to prepare for dashboards. The first of these is matching readiness. So an ISP is well placed to carry out analysis of data, the personal details that are going to be exposed to the dashboards. They can also have extra services that compare that personal data with external financial reference data, credit reference agency data, to look at forenames, surnames, dates of birth, postcodes, and see whether they look like they're held correctly on the admin records. They can identify gaps and issues in data, and issues might be minor typos in surname or typos in dates of birth, which are more common than you would think, but they still cause a big problem for matching. The ISP, though, is particularly well suited to doing this when it comes to answering the question, how will those data gaps actually impact matching performance? Because the ISP knows all the different matching options they offer. And they should be able to do modeling to actually go through and say, right, given the quality of the data we see here, how do we estimate matching is going to perform? How many members do we think are not going to be able to find their pension? And having carried that exercise out, then you can think back to think, well, how can we make upfront data improvement? Do we need to make upfront improvement? For active members, maybe it's reaching out to employers and trying to correct issues with forenames and surnames that have been drawn out, and of course dates of birth. For deferred members, can you correct typos where they're absolutely clear typos without engaging with that individual? Because you want to try and do that if you can, otherwise they will try and engage with you when they use dashboards, and of course they won't be able to find the pension. The last area in terms of ISPs adding value relates to something that Kelsey covered in quite a bit of detail, which is the area around AVCs and pension values. ISPs can help coordinate multiple sources of data that are coming through. So for example, where there's a split administration scenario, but the most common example is the one that Kelsey described well, which is the challenge of putting AVCs onto dashboards. ISPs can help in terms of capturing data. I think one of the main areas they can help is actually organizing the way those pension values get exposed to dashboards, because as we know from what Kelsey described, illustration dates can be different between ABC providers at the moment and the main scheme administrator. And even if they're the same, when the calculations are carried out, the point in time when those calculations are ready could be different in that scheme year. So being able to marshal that data and release it to dashboards at the same time, so the saver sees everything going forward to the next illustration date, is a very useful thing to do, and ISPs are very well placed to actually do that. They can also help in other areas in terms of actually carrying out pension value calculations and helping to support some of the challenges that providers and administrators will have, who of course have many other things to do other than just dashboards preparation, as we know. So that's all I wanted to cover this morning. So Mark, I'm going to hand back to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Maurice, and thanks to all our speakers. Excellent work, everybody. Thank you. Probably just worth saying that XPS and ITM have been working on a case study which is published today, covering how XPS has gone about preparing their schemes for dashboards with the support of ITM on data analysis and so forth. That's being published today through Pensions Age. We will send that to you along with the slides subsequent to today's event. Right, we do have a good number of questions, which is great. We've got 11 minutes, or probably 10 by the time I stop. So I'm going to read those out and ask individuals to respond. Guys, if you could make your responses as brief as they can be, but nevertheless still get your message across, so we can try and get through as many questions as possible. So, first one is for Joe. The question is, Joe said that we can share the informal staging timetable with pension schemes and clients. Does that mean the proposed staging deadlines won't change and we can share all the information? Joe.
So yeah, it is okay to share and discuss with clients those staging dates that were shared by DWP in November last year, but they are indicative dates only. We're not expecting big changes. So I think you can reasonably plan around those dates, but there might be some tweaks. So subject to DWP publishing the final version.
Joe, thank you very much. Another one for you, Joe. Will there eventually be a requirement for schemes with fewer than 100 members to connect?
Yeah, I think I can say I'm actually on secondment from the DWP, so I think I can say with my DWP policy hat on, because I was working on the policy on dashboards before coming over the programme, it certainly was envisaged that you would want to eventually bring those small and micro schemes into scope, but it was felt that we should wait until we understood the sort of ISP market that had time to mature before sort of compelling. I think there's 20-odd thousand small and micro schemes out there, but they only account for something like 0.02% or something like that of the total proportion of membership. So I think in the long term, I would expect so, but nothing's been confirmed as yet.
Thanks, Joe. Kelsey, one for you. Are you using a tool to produce the scheme level connection readiness report?
Yes, we are. And Morris may want to step in here because we are using tools that are aligned with our ISP, so Pension Fusion, that ITM.
Yeah, thanks, Kelsey. Yeah, no, absolutely. So we're using an approach that's pretty much what I outlined earlier. So we actually take data for XPS's schemes. We use our credit reference partner to actually do an analysis of that data to see whether the credit reference partner holds different values for the key data items, full name, surname, date of birth, postcode being the key ones. We then run that through our Fusion modeler to actually show what the impact of that would be on matching. And then the sort of the key indicator that we tend to draw out from that is this estimate of the number of members who need to actually use possible matching. Because possible matching, well, it's a safety net. It's not an ideal scenario, and it carries administration overhead. But we can see how that sort of breaks down in terms of adding different match criteria and what effect that will have on that outcome. The last thing that we've done is create some models to actually look at these discrepancies and try and deal with that challenge that I think I touched on before, where you have a deferred member, say, who you're not engaged with, and you can see that the date of birth looks like it's had a typo. You can see that maybe the surname's got a typo in there. What can you do to correct that prior to them using dashboards? Because you probably don't have the luxury of being able to actually reach out to them because they're not engaged with you. But when they use dashboards and decide they want to have a look at perhaps their most recent pensions, the pension that you have for them, maybe a small DB scheme, they won't find that because you haven't been able to improve the data. So we're working with XPS at the moment on trying to see how improvements can be made up front to data, as well as providing that possible match safety net if they can't.
Thanks, Morris. Thanks, Kelsey. Joe, back to you. When will PDP make the test harness available for ISPs and providers connecting directly to continue or start their testing?
Yeah, so this is something for volunteer participants, those connecting directly to the ecosystem. The testing strategy is going to be outlined at our next connection delivery group meeting towards the end of this month. So the lead test manager will be able to take you through plans. I haven't got a a date yet confirmed for when the test harness will be available, though. I expect it would be before we're expecting to start connection with volunteer participants, so for August.
Joe, thank you. Couple of questions on AVCs, which Maurice and Kelsey, you might like to address. First of all, probably for Kelsey, one of our guests has obviously pointed out that renewal dates are usually very different to the actual statement generation dates. How are you aligning benefit illustration dates where there are AVC benefits involved?
I think that's one of the things that we are still working on. There will need to be a discussion, or I mean, ultimately the trustees will decide the value date. So whether they choose to align that with the date that the ABC statements are currently valued at, or the scheme benefits are currently valued at, then we will have to work out how to ensure all of those values are calculated in line with that date. So yeah, I think that's one of the big questions that we answered across the board.
Maurice, have you got anything to add to that briefly?
Yeah, I mean, just agreeing, it is a real challenge. I think, you know, I do really think it's something that ISPs can help with, because pension admin systems will have their values and ABC providers will be providing their values, and having some marshalling, some sort of, you know, organization to when they actually get applied to dashboards, rather than just allowing these things to sort of come through, I think would be really useful. So yeah, I certainly would suggest that's something that ISPs can help with going forward.
Thanks. Probably a question for everybody on AVCs. Is there a third option for trustees? That is, transfer them to Master Trust, then you don't have to worry about them. Is anybody seeing activity of that nature?
I suppose just taking this to start with, so I mean, the key problem with AVCs to me is that because the AVC comes under the trustee's responsibility, and it's the trustee that has the duties, I think that's where the problems kind of reside, really, because you know, when you look at the regulations, that they speak to the trustee as the person who has, as the body that has the duties to carry out matching and to put all the benefits on at the same illustration date. So if transferring them to a master trust breaks that link, then it would help. If it doesn't break that link, then I think you've still got that sort of core problem that I've just been describing, would be my thought. But I don't know if anyone else wants to come in on that.
I think we have certainly seen schemes transferring ABC benefits to Master Trust recently. I'm not sure whether that's specifically driven by the need to take them out of scope for pensions dashboards, but yeah, it could help resolve some issues. And I mean, certainly, I guess there's many schemes out there that have multiple ABC policies, and if you've got 3 ABC providers that all provide statements at a value date, then you can't please everybody. So you know, it may be that transferring them could, if not rid the problem, at least help make it consistent.
Thank you, Kelsey. Joe, 2 final questions. We may not squeeze them both in, but let's see if we can. Once a user sees their pensions information across various pots, is anything planned to allow transactions like consolidation?
So no, not planned, and to include something like transaction capability on dashboards would be a significant change. That would be subject to you know, DWP consultation, parliamentary scrutiny, and all of those things. So, but as far as I'm aware, there's nothing planned like that.
Okay, Joe, thank you. And finally, let's squeeze it in. Can you remind us of the responsibilities for plans under buy-in and who may be transitioning to buy-out before the October 26th deadline?
So I think the message here is you should be thinking about your plans for connection to the dashboard ecosystem, and have a contingency plan to connect if buyout hasn't been completed before the end of October 2026. There are some easements in terms of the requirements around providing value data when a scheme is in the process of winding up.
Cool. So thank you very much. We have overrun, obviously a very bad host, I apologise. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you very much to everybody for joining. Delighted to see that very nearly everybody stayed on to the end. My email address is on the screen in front of you there if you want to make contact with me to talk about anything that our SMEs can help you with on data, on dashboards and dashboards related items. Please don't hesitate. Thank you very much, everybody. Cheerio. Bye now.
Cheers.